10 years living with my husband, I only know how to give, keep nothing for myself. 10 years living in a seemingly peaceful marriage, I gave up everything for the man I loved. From career, hobbies, to youth. But one day, when he said he might leave, I suddenly realized, if that happened, I would have nothing left. What made a devoted wife suddenly become indifferent? And is love enough to save a marriage that is falling apart? 10 years, not a very long time, but enough for a woman to give up everything for the person she loves. I entered this marriage with sincere love and the belief that as long as I tried my best, happiness would always exist. I chose him not because he was a successful or rich man, but because I believed in his kindness, decency, and benevolence. That is why, even though there were many better economic options, I still decided to follow him, far away from my family, starting a completely new journey in a place that was not my hometown. From a girl who used to like to gather with friends, live comfortably, I voluntarily gave up everything to become a woman of the family. I accepted to leave the office job that my parents expected, accepted to work as a worker in a foreign country just because I wanted to build a home with him. For me at that time, just having him was enough. I could wake up early every day to prepare food, even though I was tired. I still diligently washed dishes, cooked, cleaned, without a word of complaint. I went to work from early morning to late at night, even working overtime on Saturdays, so that he could stay home to take care of the housework. I did not regret the salary I earned, willing to hand it all over to him to manage, only keeping a small part for personal consumption and sending it back to my parents. Perhaps many people will ask, why did I sacrifice so much? But at that time, I did not feel that I was at a disadvantage. When I was in love, I thought it was natural. If he did not like to eat something, I would be willing to abstain from that food for a whole month. Working in the fields with him, I took on the heavy burden because I knew his health was poor. On weekends, I still quietly cleaned and did the laundry, never letting him worry. I never complained, never felt regretful. The love at that time was so great that it made me forget myself. Forget that in marriage, not only giving, but also receiving. Just like that, each day passed. I was like a quiet shadow behind the husband I loved. I thought I was building happiness, but in fact I was gradually losing myself. I did not realize it until he said coldly, "We may not be able to continue." Just one sentence. But everything I had cherished for 10 years suddenly fell apart. At that moment, I realized in panic, if I had to leave today, I would have nothing in my hands, no money, no career, no plans for the future. And that was the moment that woke me up from my dream of sacrifice. After that mental shock, I began to look back at everything that had happened. Not only my silent sacrifices, but also the way we started and built this marriage. I suddenly realized that what made me willing to give everything, accept even the loss for myself for 10 years, was the pure love I had for him at first. A love that I thought was enough to fill all the gaps, enough to keep our married life strong, no matter how stormy it was. When we got married, he was still working, still knowing how to care for and look after me in a gentle, quiet way, but enough to make me feel secure. In my mind at that time, he was a kind and decent man, something I valued more than money or career. I was proud to choose him among many other more successful men because I believed that sincerity and honesty were the solid foundations for marriage. I was right at that time. But I did not expect that, because I loved too much, trusted too deeply. I gradually lost the right, to balance in my relationship. Love is not wrong, but the way I loved made myself gradually disappear. I was always the one who adjusted my emotions to suit him, limited the things he did not like, endured long silences in marriage, like the couple sleeping separately for months, even years, just because I thought he is tired, I understand, I can wait. I told myself, love is acceptance, tolerance, sacrifice, so I never dared to ask for anything. But love also needs to be reciprocated, and that is something I did not realize sooner. I gave him all my trust, put my future and feelings in the hands of one person. Well, I didn't keep anything to rely on if things fell apart. I used to think that as long as I gave my all, the other person would stay. But the reality is, love cannot exist with only one person nurturing it. He was not wrong to choose to quit his job, not wrong to be weak or tired, but the mistake was that I forgot to ask myself, what about me? I excluded myself from the happiness equation, while I also needed to be loved and cared for properly. The more I look back, the more I see clearly, love cannot be just a reason. Because to start, it must be the motivation for both of us to make an effort to maintain. I loved him so much that I lost the line between love and sacrifice. And when those sacrifices were no longer recognized, it turned into fatigue, torment, and finally hurt. That's when I understood. If you don't love yourself first, no one can love you properly. After realizing that I had lost myself in a love that was too sacrificial, I began to look closely at the imbalance that was silently eroding our marriage. I couldn't deny that in the early years he had tried, he had worked, he had taken care of me, he had shared some of the responsibilities in the family. But I don't know when, the role and burden gradually shifted to me, while he retreated, became passive, and gradually became dependent. At first, I thought it was temporary. I made excuses for him that he was in poor health, that he needed time to recover, or simply that he needed a wife to stand by him as a support. I just kept on shouldering everything without a word of complaint, because I thought, I am a wife, I love my husband, so I have to be sympathetic. It's okay to shoulder more. But as time went on, that endurance was no longer voluntary, but turned into a habit, and then a burden. I began to feel exhausted both physically and mentally. A day of working from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., working overtime continuously, coming home and rushing into the kitchen to cook, clean, and do laundry. I always thought, just try a little longer, I'm home to take care of things. But in reality, he didn't do as much as I thought. He didn't know how to cook, so I always had to wake up early to prepare food the day before. He didn't pay much attention to housework, so on weekends, I was still the one sweeping the floor, washing dishes, doing laundry, and rearranging everything. I lived in an endless cycle, taking on all responsibilities with a blind belief that it was love. I used to think I was a strong person, able to take care of my family both mentally and physically. But no one can stay strong forever in a relationship where only one person carries the burden. I started to feel tired, empty, and sometimes felt disrespected. I don't blame him completely, because I let it happen. I gave him the right to be passive, to be weak, to rest, forgetting that I also needed those things. I didn't speak up, didn't share, didn't react. And then that silence made me invisible in the eyes of the husband I once loved so much. The distance in marriage doesn't just come from sleeping separately or not eating together, but it grows from the lack of sharing, the lack of equality in responsibilities. I still clearly remember the nights when I came home exhausted, lying on the bed with tears flowing, not because of arguments, not because of any specific pain, but because of the feeling of extreme loneliness in my own home. That was when I understood. Love, no matter how right the choice begins, if not nurtured regularly by both sides, will gradually disappear like sand, slipping through the fingers. The fatigue accumulated over time, combined with a feeling of loneliness in my own home, gradually changed me. From a wife who was always cheerful, always proactive in taking care of and worrying about everything, I began to withdraw. I no longer cooked elaborate dishes, no longer told him the little stories of the day, no longer passionately cared for a home that I had once wholeheartedly protected. Not because I stopped loving, but because I was exhausted. When the heart is starved for too long, it closes itself, so it won't hurt anymore. I used to think that just being silent, just trying alone was enough. But when the cracks became more and more obvious, when my every little action no longer came from love but only from duty, I knew I had reached my limit. I no longer expected anything from him. No need for compliments, no need for a hug, no question. I just wanted to be at ease. And then I began to let go. Gradually let go of each habit that used to be sacred between husband and wife. He probably felt that change. From a wife who always asked and worried, I gradually became silent and cold. From a woman who was willing to wake up early to cook for him, I began to let him take care of things himself. From someone who could take all the housework in my arms, I began to choose to rest instead of cleaning up on weekends. Indifference did not come overnight, but it accumulated from small disappointments, piling up over a decade. And then the thing I least expected happened. He changed. Maybe when I was still trying, he thought it was a given, but when I let go, he realized how important my presence in his life was. He started asking me what I needed, started to voluntarily share the housework, and started going to work again. Sometimes I thought, why did you wait until I was no longer strong enough for him to change? But then I asked myself, if he didn't change, would I have the courage to let go? The answer is, not sure. However, I didn't rush to forgive, nor did I immediately open my heart again. I chose to step back, observe, and give both of us time, peace to think. Because I know love cannot continue if it is only temporarily saved by a few temporary changes. I need a sincere, long-term change, and I need to relearn how to love more soberly. No longer unconditional sacrifice, but love that is reciprocal, sharing, and true companionship. At this time, I no longer expect a happy ending like a fairy tale. I just hope that if we continue, both of us will learn to appreciate each other at the right time. If not, I will be strong enough to leave this time. With my head held high, not empty-handed and full of regret. When I choose to let go of expectations and give both of us some quiet time, I have the opportunity to listen to myself. No longer too concerned with having to cook a meal that pleases my husband, clean the house perfectly, or force a smile when I am exhausted, I feel like I can breathe again. For the first time in many years, I asked myself, what do I really want in this life? Not a question for a wife, for a mother, but for myself. A woman who has lost herself for too long in the so-called role. I do not deny that my husband has had positive changes. He has begun to understand more, to observe my emotions and proactively fix the small things that were once neglected. But more importantly, I no longer put all my happiness in his hands. I learned to love myself again, not through lipstick or dressing up, but by allowing myself to be tired, to rest, to be sad, to be angry, and sometimes to say no. We are still in the consideration stage. No one has made a definitive decision, but we are no longer clinging in despair. He has changed. I have changed. But most importantly, we are both more honest with each other than ever. There are no more days when I try to be the perfect wife, nor are there days when he stays silent and ignores everything because he thinks she's used to it. Everyone is relearning how to exist together, not by habit, but by awareness. I don't expect a perfect marriage, but I hope I am sober enough to realize, where is the limit of sacrifice? Where is my own value? For the past 10 years, I have lived as if love is something that requires giving up everything. But now, I understand that true love does not require anyone to lose themselves to keep the other. If one day he and I are no longer together, I will still move forward. No longer a woman with nothing, but a woman who knows how to stand on her own 2 feet. I write these lines not to complain or tell my pain. I write to affirm. We women need to be listened to, understood, and have the right to choose happiness equally. Whether you stay or leave, be the one to decide, because love is not a place for us to sacrifice unconditionally, but a place for us to grow up together, to be strong together. Or if we can't anymore, we will part ways in respect, not in silence and hurt. I'm not sure what the future will be, but at least now I know I'm back to myself, and that, for me, is a new beginning.